it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Well, they say the fear of burglars is not only the fear of being robbed, but also the fear of a sudden and unexpected clutch out of the darkness. Makes sense, doesn't it? The dark, covering up that which we fear, made all the worse when it happens in our own home, such as we will see in tonight's collection of stories. It's inside your house. It wakes you. Not the moan of a withered hag or the fleeting voice of a dead man, but the low trill of wind slipping past your window, air being pressed into hushed breath. The shadows meld themselves back into your bedroom. You blink. The blurred, hazy object of your alarm clock focuses back to existence. 2:48 a.m., the numbers decree. You don't want to be awake. You don't even want to keep your eyes open. Yet here you are. Outside, the air stirs in utter turmoil, churning up to 50 miles an hour and beating against your home. You'd known this was coming. In fact, you'd known it the moment you'd seen those thunderheads pulling in from the west, lightning forking within them. From the storm's downdraft came bursts of pine-lace wind, sharp and deceptively sweet. A destructive force careening from the Atlantic all the way through the barrens, that large tract of wild, unbroken wilderness. You've often seen in the distance the tall, stalky pines of its dark woods, shivering in the gales. It's been a gusty time for Jersey this year. What was it you were dreaming about, anyway? Who knows? The information is already lost to the senseless grumble of thoughts trying to piece the dream back together. Gone. Although an image of falling water still rests vividly in your mind. Your bladder sends a signal to your brain, demanding relief. Half awake, you mechanically saunter down the short hall to the bathroom. You flick the lights on, too bright. You rub away the floaters and zigzags from your eyes. You yawn as your soles scrape over the cold tiles, and then yawn again as you complete your natural business. Sweet release. You flush and lift the faucet handle to wash your hands. A sound. Your gaze flicks toward the door. You listen again. Silence, save for the occasional squeak and groan of the walls, probably from the breeze battering them outside. Whatever it was, you're too tired to care. Glass shatters. Wakefulness spikes through you now as this new sound resonates, crawling up from the dark of downstairs. You pull a sharp inhale down your throat. Your wet hands flinch soapy pellets over the countertop. Stop. Breathe. Calm yourself. It could have been anything, like a tree branch or some other debris that got swept up and propelled through the window. That's it, you tell yourself, nodding, hoping. A loud, powerful thud bangs downstairs, and hope flees. Now, muffled movement. Break-in, a burglar. Horror films you haven't seen in years slide through your mind like celluloid movie reels. Your reflection in the mirror turns goosey white, contorted with fear. The police, your thoughts propose. Call the police. Your eyes trace the room for your phone. It's still lying on your bed. There's still time. You can rush back there, barricade the door, and call the police from the closet. How long will it take them to get here? It doesn't matter. Just call them. You grip the doorknob, ready to sprint straight to your room. The dump, dump, dump on the stairs freezes your limbs. Something fast and large bounds down your hallway just beyond the door. Something so terrible, so lively that even the deepest folds of your nightmares could never recreate this moment. Vibrations roll by your toes. Feet like heavy pegs tromp up to your bedroom door. It swings open, bashing clumsily against the wall at the forced entry. You stand there, anchored to the cold tiles of the bathroom, paralyzed by the shock of it all. The short space to your room fills with thrashing sounds, bedsheets being ripped and torn asunder, the box springs squeaking and jittering violently. Your fingers, still welded to the doorknob, refuse to twist it an inch further. A few steps away, something of significant size and savagery guts your mattress, the place you'd been just moments ago. A cold wash starts at your chest and drips down to your groin. Your breathing is now terse as your heart pumps with a new and sudden weight. Your mouth is dry, your throat rubber. Focus. These are the impulses you must hold on to, the hot blood mounting up in your throat, the intensity dilating your pupils and lacing your eyes red, the lift in your gut from an absolute freefall. These things, hardwired into your system, will keep you alive tonight. The thrashing stops. A rapid cackling emerges. High, scratchy sounds grow louder as they echo down the hallway, expelling from a mouth you dare not imagine. The cackles sputter into bleating, like a goat coughing up mucus. Not the sound of a burglar. Not at all. The thing moves again, its hammer feet pound in chaotic pacing until it finally stops and settles on something. Whoom, whoom, whoom. A succession of bangs on the closet door. Why? Because it thinks that's where you are. But what is it exactly? Oh, you can't stay here. You need to leave before it finds you. The cords in your hand tighten over the handle. You mentally prepare to enter the hallway. In your periphery, your bleached reflection in the mirror verifies your struggle with that simple action. But still, the hope of escape eases the gritty feelings of leaving this small, safe place. You turn the knob fully now. The door opens, thankfully without a creak. You move quietly down the hall, light on the balls of your feet. The walls groan again as another draft clambers over them. The windows flash. The lightning is so close you can hear the crackling particles. You peer back towards your bedroom to make sure its attention hasn't left the closet. Whoomph! Another pound against it signals back, much louder out here. You continue, each measured step as slow as possible. Just one sound, one small little thump in the carpet. That's all it will take to alert something truly horrible. As you draw closer to the stairs, a sullen urgency pushes you to move just a little faster. You have the screaming urge to run, to barrel down the stairs and leap out the front door in nothing but your underwear. But you resist. Judging by how quickly it closed the gap from the stairs to your bed, you have no difficulty guessing who would win in the mad scramble. Not without a head start, at least. A terrible crash reverberates behind you. The closet's been freed from its hinges. Heavy feet start moving again. It's coming. You kick off from your heels and practically vault the rest of the way. You round the stairs and take the first few steps. The grandfather clock that you kept in the entryway has toppled flat on its face and now blocks the front doorway. No, not toppled. Pushed. Chunks of glass riddle the floor from the broken window in the living room. You could push the clock out of the way, open the door just enough to slide through and get out, but there's no time. Deranged chatters move down the hallway behind you. It's closing in fast. Your bare soles clap against the stairs. You reach the bottom and wind around to the living room. Pain jolts up your leg. A sharp bit of glass has pricked into your foot. The shard crunches and embeds itself deeper into the nerve. Desperate, you fall toward the coffee table and roll beneath it. Heavy stomps now bang all the way down to the bottom step. You put a hand over your mouth. You squeeze your eyes shut. Another sickish bleat croaks out of the thing. It wanders around the room. Wind whips through the broken window, kicking up the drapes. The steps are loud like the hard heel of a dress shoe as it clucks against hard wood. Different scents now trace your nose. A scent you can almost recognize. Something sharp and green, like being outside. It's that Yulish scent of pine needles again, now blended with a thick, manure-y musk, that smell of the dark woods. Each hard step sends tremors through you. Don't look. Don't even take a breath. Don't think of what it'll do if it finds you. How vivid those thoughts teeming with horrors are. How quickly your screams will be silenced by teeth. How great the amount of blood that will pool out of your newly opened flesh, ripped and tattered like your bedsheets. Do not look. But of course, you look. Your eyes negotiate with the surrounding darkness, and you immediately regret looking. The deep sting of your foot no longer reaches you. The shock numbs the bulking fear welling up in your chest. Long black legs canter near you, tiered with fur. They are like the legs of a winter skinny deer capped with bony, cloven hooves. Behind them snakes a forked, leathery tail. A mouth you cannot see clicks its cuspids. The thing whoops loudly and then cackles like a hyena. No, your thoughts murmur, like the devil. The bony feet circle around and vanish into the black gap of the kitchen. A chair scoots as though brushed involuntarily. A clatter of things clang onto the floor, pots and pans falling from their racks. You cautiously adjust your placement beneath the table. The pain in your soul sharpens again. Are you bleeding? Will it be able to smell the blood? To taste it lingering in the air? No, if that were the case, it would have found you by now. A vision you don't feed for very long. Perhaps you can wait it out. Stay hidden until it gives up and moves on. A vain hope. It heard you run down the stairs. It knows you're still here somewhere. You allow yourself to swallow, feeling unhinged by it all. This isn't your house anymore. It's somewhere else. Some dark side of some distant planet you don't belong on. A place where something with hooves is stalking the halls, looking for you. The back door, maybe. No, you recall how the rollers were starting to stick and squeak lately. Oh, too loud. And even if you did manage to squeeze through in time, the thought of having to outrun the thing fills you with immense dread. You look to the broken window. The frame is spiked with shards waiting to slice through an artery. Not to mention all the scattered fragments your feet would surely find again. Running would be impossible after that. An idea suddenly clicks. The car keys. You left them on the kitchen counter. They should still be there, mockingly close. If you can just reach them and sneak into the garage, you can get out of here. And that, you reflect, sounds like a good plan. The thing migrates from the kitchen and clucks down the hall. Its cloven feet thump down more stairs. The basement. It must think you've gone there. That'll buy you some time. Not very much, though. Out you go from the coffee table. You breathe softly, small jitters rattling your lungs. You pause a moment to brush a few fingers across your foot to get the glass out. It works some, but you'll need tweezers to get the rest of those evil bits. In the kitchen, you glance about for your keys. Some pans and a dirty skillet litter the floor. The spice rack is toppled, and a feathery art piece of garlic powder has formed on the porcelain. You move forward toward the counter with cautious steps. From the lower level, a muted crash rises up. Something else has been forcibly shoved over. You must hurry. You spot the keys. You stretch out your blood-speckled fingers and curl around them, carefully lifting them so as to not let them jingle in your grip. Another thought dawns on you and leads your hand next to the cutlery drawer. Sharp metal things rattle inside as you open it, much too loud for comfort. But you find and grab the sharpest knife there, so the noise is well worth it. A calculated risk. Having both the keys and the knife in your hands offers a small dose of victory, but you still need to make it down the hall, past the basement stairwell and into the garage. You peer down the corridor and hug the wall as you walk it. You pass by the basement quickly. imagining just for a moment something ready to screech its way out of the pitch. But in just a few paces, you've reached the doorway to the garage. You grasp the doorknob and pull the door open. A new sound reaches you from behind, a wet, acknowledging grunt. You turn. From out of the unseen stairwell, a long, muscular neck twists toward you. Its hooves scrape into the hall. The house flashes with another strobe of lightning, giving feature to its tall, amorphous shape. Its jagged horns extend outwards, coil back in a goatish curl. Leathery skin hangs down from its thick-haired body, hitting its backside in wrinkled folds. Eyes the color of muddy water. Eyes that have finally found you. And reaching out of the mottled fur, a skinless, horsey face composed of yellowed, still living bone. It clicks its teeth again. Sharp. Waiting. Your hand does not move from the door handle. It clenches almost as tightly as the other hand does around the knife, both trembling. The blade is no more than a paperclip compared to the thing before you, twitching its talons. One of your feet is already out the door, squeezed into the small crack of the garage, but there was never going to be a clean escape. It would never allow such a thing. The fear now settles into your legs, grasping the inside of them. It seeps into your joints, turning them into mulch. Thoughts cease altogether. In the next instant, you force yourself to move as everything else moves in rapid order. The door pulling open, hooves beating closer, a high, shrillish cackle. You squeeze into the garage, chased by hot, bestial breath brushing up your neck and down your shoulder. You move to sweep the door closed, but 3 hellish claws slip through the gap. They hook into the thin wood, propping the entry open against their leathery skin. It moves on the other end, tugging angrily at the panel. You pull against it with every cord, every tendon burning in your forearm. You jam the keyring into your mouth while the other hand struggles to keep hold of the knife. The thing yips loudly from the other end. Its thick stench clings to your face. It's strong, and as the pressure from its grasp continues to climb, you know that it's winning. In one quick motion, you plunge the knife deep into the webbing of its talons. A horrible sound, much like the yowl of a dying cat, brays from the other side of the door. Dark crimson blood runs down the steel and drips off in red tears. The claws retract, taking the handle with them as the door finally closes. You climb inside your car, unwilling to take another breath until the keys finally find the slot. The engine rouses to life, and all the symbols on the dash light up in green and amber. You yank the gear stick into reverse, and nearly back the trunk straight into the garage door, thankfully catching yourself and clicking the opener just above your head. The door pulls open with a squeal of rollers and hinges. Even before the metal sheet comes to a stop overhead, you back out and slope down the street. Hands still shaking, you simultaneously switch the gear to drive and slam a hurt foot over the gas pedal. The car peels down the road, revving higher and higher until your house and street are out of sight completely. You look to the rear view, partially anticipating to see it back there, standing tall and upright beneath a street lamp. But there is nothing. You've done it. You've escaped. Your wide, veiny eyes find the road again, as a spasm of wind nearly knocks you off course. It doesn't matter where you're going, not right now anyway. All that matters is getting as far away as possible. A thin laugh shivers out of you, perhaps jovial, perhaps just a bit too manic. You slow down a little, finally allowing some calmness to penetrate through the panic. The wind still howls and sweeps over your vehicle, but as it quiets, a different sound rises behind it, like 2 heavy tarps flapping about. You look at the side mirrors and again at the rear view. Did you just see something? A thud sounds on the roof. you take another breath and depress the accelerator. There's something off about my new girlfriend. Family, the best thing in the world, in my opinion. I love both my mum and my dad, and I'm sure they both love me. But sadly, they just didn't love each other. In the aftermath of one of their loud nights, my mum packed up her things and forced me to move away from our old home. The split-up was messy, and after an argued legal battle, my mum lost almost everything from the house, to the car and even our dog. She lost everything, except me. The following weeks left a bitter feeling in my mind as I packed my clothes and other essentials, and as I left the house I'd grown up in, never once did I make eye contact with my dad, or I would have made a scene. It felt horrible leaving all my friends and school behind. The memories we'd formed together would last a lifetime, but the worst was leaving Ashley behind. The first girl I'd ever had feelings for. We'd first met when I found her smoking behind the sports shed. I needed a place to hide from a bully. Well, me and Ashley still talked on a regular basis through text and FaceTime. Well, that was until about 2 weeks ago when she broke the news that I'd always feared was coming. She told me that after I'd left, she'd been getting close to someone else at school. That person was Ryan Hallows, my now ex-best friend. Well, I felt a rush of emotions flood into me from betrayal, anger, upset. All of them forced me to choke and tear up. Well, I know it was inevitably going to happen, but why Ryan? Well, it wasn't a secret that Ryan had developed a crush on Ashley, mainly out of a childish rivalry with me, and he knew he'd have a free opportunity with my folks' divorce. I'll admit my last words to Ashley were not good ones. They went something like this. "You don't care about me, I bet you only care about having someone to grab and squeeze." Not surprisingly, she blocked me afterwards. And as for Ryan, he spent no time at all plastering the argument all over social media. Well, I was then faced with a new problem, finding someone else to replace Ashley. I tried at my new school, but all the nice girls were taken. And as for the strange girls, well, they were surprisingly not interested. During my lunch break at school, I unintentionally bumped into a kid named Hilton, spilling my drink onto him. Not wanting to fight, I quickly ran from the dining hall and out of the school. I decided from then on, I'd leave and buy myself a fresh sandwich and a packet of crisps from the nearby co-op. I did, however, need somewhere to eat. I checked the park, but it was occupied by hoodies. My next location was at the train station, but the noise just kept on bothering me. After around 15 minutes of searching, I finally found the best place to eat. A small wooden bench that sat atop a hill overlooking the church and its cemetery. The area was nice, with a large tree hanging over the seat providing shade, and although the bench was wooden, it still felt very comfortable. I felt at ease next to the graveyard, and all the tendered graves. It made me feel like I belonged there. Crazy, I know, but I wasn't really normal. In fact, I was about as abnormal as you could get. I had a very morbid sense of humor and enjoyed the macabre. As I sat eating my sandwich, a girl who couldn't have been any older than myself crashed down onto the bench, almost uplifting it. She was crying loudly and burying her face into her hands. Her hair was dark brown in a ponytail with straggly hairs jutting out. Odder still, she had bits of what looked like dried dirt haphazardly thrown about it. Her dress was loose-fitting, black and stained, all in one with a cut-off point just at the knee. She wore black leggings underneath that were riddled with rips, some of which had been quickly but unprofessionally sewn shut. The main thing that stuck out most, though, was her shoes, more like a sewn combination of smart shoes and boots that were caked in dried mud. I couldn't help but draw parallels to the outfit of something you would wear to a funeral. Oh, as it was just the two of us there, my mind wanted to know what was wrong. I recklessly swallowed the large chunks of sandwich in my mouth and turned to her. "Hi, are you okay?" I asked, slightly shaking in my voice. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone would be here. There usually isn't," said the girl from behind her hands. She seemed afraid and withdrawn at first, but slowly began to open up to me. "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Aaron," I quickly added. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Debbie." We exchanged pleasantries for a few brief moments until the sound of the Imperial March began blaring from my phone. As soon as my ear sat next to the phone, my mum began screaming and complaining down the line. Her questions began with, "Why wasn't I at school?" And then they became more personal attacks like, "Do I want to end up like a useless pile of rubbish like my dad?" After eventually getting her to calm down, much to Debbie's amusement, my mum informed me that it was 10 minutes past 3. I looked at my watch in horror. It was indeed the time my mum had bellowed at me. Well, I profusely apologized to Debbie as I gathered all my items and made a hasty run back home. Unsurprisingly, I was suspended for the next few days for playing truant, and because the best thing for a student who skips school is to give them extra time off, well, I made the most of that time. Once my mum left for work, I set up my bed to look as if I'd not gotten out, and I slipped out the kitchen window. There's really only one place I was going to. Back to the cemetery, hoping to meet Debbie again. Well, sure enough, there she was, sat on the bench, crying as if she'd never moved. She wore the exact same clothing as yesterday. The dirty black dress, the ripped tights, and the scruffy ponytail. I sat down next to her as I'd done yesterday and asked if she was still okay. Debbie turned to me, her tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Aaron, yes, I'm fine. It's just my ex-boyfriend. He's been violent towards me, hitting me and using me to put out his cigarettes. I keep getting away, but no matter what, he always finds me." I moved up close to Debbie. "You know, if he shows up, I'll keep you safe," I said, bearing far too much confidence. Debbie smiled and placed her head on my arm. Her head was freezing, as was her entire body. Well, I know that English summers could be cold, but it was surprisingly warm today. I used my hoodie to cover Debbie as she huddled closer to me. I felt a tingle run through my body, like I'd finally met a truly special person, a feeling I thought I'd forgotten after Ashley. Well, I met up with Debbie every day of my suspension until I had to go back to school. The very fact I had to return angered me. When I arrived back at school, I wasted no time telling the closest thing I had to a friend there, Dale, all about Debbie. Now, Dale was like me, in which I mean he had also a fascination in the macabre. Dale had never known anyone named Debbie, and being that his family were local council members, he did legitimately know everyone. I even told Dale about how we'd met in the cemetery. Well, after saying this, I could see Dale had become very suspicious and excused himself. His reason was that he needed to do some investigation on a story he'd heard. As I left school and headed home, I felt as if I was being followed. Every now and then I glanced backwards, feeling as if someone was right behind me. When I got home, I found that my mum had left to go on a speed dating night. Ever since leaving my dad, she would do this from time to time and always left me home alone. Around 10 p.m, there was a knock at the door. I had just expected that it was my mum who'd been drinking after another unsuccessful time at the speed dating thing. To my surprise, it was Debbie, standing in the doorway, shivering and looking half dead. I invited her in, and we got set up in my bedroom. Debbie sat down blankly and kicked off her muddy shoes, getting settled in the process. I thought I was incredibly lucky that I had a beautiful girl on my bed. As I cuddled up to her, I slowly ran my fingers through her hair, but stopped as I brushed past something that felt like a soft dint. Debbie winced but tried to hide it, as if she just had a chill. I leaned into Debbie, going for a kiss, when once again there was a loud knock at my front door. Filled with annoyance at being stopped at what was most definitely the best part of my life, I began to leave when Debbie spoke in a very frail, almost dying voice. "Please, don't go." In my mind, I was wondering who it could be now, my mum or the rest of the village. I was knocked over by Dale, who walked in frantically, trying to explain something, the words constantly spilling out of his mouth. I slapped Dale, snapping him out of his panicked and confused states. Dale then took out a folder from his bag, with Debbie's name crudely written on it. Inside was an article from a newspaper about how a girl was abused and assaulted by her boyfriend and then beaten to death by him with a baseball bat. The picture underneath the article was Debbie, wearing the same black stained dress and her hair styled in the same ponytail. The newspaper article was dated almost a decade ago, and there was no way at all that the girl in the photo was Debbie. Then Dale also told me something that left me cold to the bone and unable to move. Every morning her grave would be dug up and her coffin empty. Well, the townsfolk had even tried to chain her coffin up, but it was no use. Her lifeless body would always be found on the memorial bench not far from where she was buried. Well, I became angry and livid and ran upstairs, closely followed by Dale. I took a deep breath and entered my room. Debbie laid on the bed, her body withering away. I stood, unable to move at the sight. Debbie's once dark hair was now grey and her skin was dried to a crisp. Dale moved ever closer, and in a flash Debbie jumped and tackled him to the ground and drove her fingers into his eyes. Liquid from Dale's body began to transfer over to Debbie, reinvigorating her. The grey, straggly hair became dark brown again, and her skin became hydrated once more. When she was done, Debbie stood up from the now withered corpse of Dale. Debbie looked towards me, yet even after all I'd just seen, I wasn't scared. In a hushed whisper, Debbie told me, "I need one more, then my pact is complete. Please find me someone." With little to no resistance, I picked up my phone and rang the person I knew was best. "Hey Ryan, it's Aaron. Would you like to come and visit me?" They walk among us. It's getting dark again. The dreaded fog is rolling in again. I'm cold, hungry, and, most of all, fearing for the agonizing end that will surely await me as it did for the others. They will be coming again, coming from the heavy mist itself. Ghoulish creatures with long, wispy tendrils sinisterly coiling out from their shadow-like forms. It's my punishment for what I've done. It's all my fault. I should never have chanted those damn words. I'm making my final stand here, on the porch of the cabin in the woods with my .44 Magnum revolver and this notebook with these last few pages. I'm leaving these pages behind as a warning for any unlucky soul who comes here. If you're reading this, if you don't take anything else away from this, remember these words. They walk among us. There's not much time now. The sun is only barely able to beam its light over the lake and trees. I guess I should clear my conscience while I still have the time. I'll start from the beginning. It all started last night. Me, my girlfriend Scarlett, and my best friend Trevor all went camping here in the forest. We came upon this cabin about an hour or so into our hike into the woods. We went in and unpacked our gear and set up inside. We gathered around the main area and opened up a case of beers. I wish I had one right about now. Well, the three of us got completely wasted. I'd found a book sticking out of one of the floorboards. Out of morbid curiosity, I picked it up and opened it. Even drunk, I knew this was no ordinary book. It appeared to contain ancient text. Well, I was nervous but excited. So were Scarlett and Trevor. We were into that kind of crap. So the three of us sat in a circle after lighting a few candles and chanted the text in the book. The outside sky cracked with lightning as we went on. Well, at first the three of us noticed absolutely nothing. We thought nothing had happened. Oh, how wrong we were. Only an hour later, ear-splitting shrieks were heard outside the window behind me. They sent me out first to investigate, and what I saw was them. The outside air was thick and heavy and laden with fog, so much so that I could only barely breathe. It began materializing slowly, one by one. Another inhuman shriek was let out. I ran quickly back into the house and told the others what I'd seen. Trevor went out next to see what I was talking about. Poor son of a bitch. I begged and pleaded with him not to go out there. He wouldn't heed my warnings. He went out the door and, only about a minute later, we heard yet another inhuman shriek followed by Trevor's horrified screams. I know it was a jerk thing to do, but Scarlett and I could only stand inside while Trevor's screams were heard trailing off. I hate to even imagine what end met him. I only hope that he didn't suffer, unlike my poor Scarlett. Scarlett started screaming. I ran my arms around her to try and calm her down. She was way too freaked out, pushing me away and running out of the cabin. I quickly bolted out in pursuit of her. I couldn't bear losing her, too. It seemed that no matter my efforts, I'd never be able to hold on to her. I finally caught up to her. I seized her once more and pulled her close. I told her that I loved her, and I wouldn't let what happened to Trevor happen to her. I kept assuring her of this, and sure enough, these words consoled her. But dear God, how wrong I was. The thick, heavy fog was all around us now. When we tried to make our way back to the cabin, within an instant they had us surrounded. I, in panicked instinct, drew my gun and fired 3 shots into the black, demonic, mist-like creature towering over me. The bullets had absolutely no effect, passing right through it. I might as well have been shooting thin air. I was horrified by this point, but not nearly as horrified as I was when I realized that Scarlett was no longer in my arms. Frantically, I started calling out for her. I kept running through the fog, fearing the worst. However, nothing, even in my greatest nightmares, could have made me even imagine what I saw next. There she was, my beloved Scarlett, strung up by her intestines. The worst part, however, was she was still screaming. I did the only thing I could do now. I embraced her severed waist and told her I would always love her. I kissed her, closing my eyes, and put 1 round in her head. I fell to my knees and sobbed until I heard a shriek coming from all around me. I got up and bolted. I ran until I found the cabin again. By the time I'd found it, it was already morning. I stumbled up to the porch, exhausted. But no matter how fatigued I was, sleep would not befall me, not after last night. I just stared and watched the outside world around me, knowing it would not be this beautiful at night. I know that I will not survive this night. As nightfall envelops the once beautiful outside world, I feel that I only have a few options left. I cannot let those bastards have me, so I've settled on the only alternative I have left. To those that I may hurt with my next course of action, I can only say that I'm truly sorry. They will not claim me. No, I have 1 round remaining in the chamber. I'm going to do it. It's the only way. Once again, stay away from here. They walk amongst us. The fog's all around me now. The air's getting hard to breathe again. I can hear their menacing shrieks. It's now or never. Goodbye. Something watches. I'm terrified of waking up at night. Not because I can't go back to sleep, but because I know that if I do, he'll be there, watching me. I first saw him a year ago, after going into a musky antique shop in town with my friends. The wrinkled, old woman shopkeeper noticed that I was a 5th wheel and that my 2 friends seemed to be picking on me insistently. She pulled me to the side and asked if there were any improvements I was looking to make in my life. Slightly weirded out, I told her, of course, and that I hadn't realized I was being so obvious. She went behind the counter and grabbed this vial of liquid and then told me to put some on my hands. I was definitely suspicious, but she put some on hers first, so I figured, why not? It had an odd scent to it, like a strong lavender. Ready to leave, I walked outside and was going to tell my friends about what the lady had done. Turns out they'd forgotten about me altogether and had left to the next location. No big surprise there. Then around a corner came Carrie, a girl from school I'd had a crush on for months. And to my surprise, she actually approached me to say hi. I mean, I wasn't ugly or anything, just average, I guess. But this kind of thing was definitely not normal. Sadly, I was too nervous to get her number or anything, but it still gave me a nice little boost. Then later, once I got home, my mum, who had been sick for months with a suspicious illness that doctors hadn't been able to diagnose, said she was feeling way better. This was amazing, but I still chalked it up to coincidence. That was, until I was lying in bed later and saw that I had a Facebook notification. It was from Carrie. She'd Facebook stalked me, found my profile and added me. This was getting downright suspicious. After that, her and I started texting, and things were going surprisingly well. I also found out that I'd gotten one of the highest grades in the class on one of my math tests, which, I was terrible at math. So, I actually seriously started considering whether this oil was doing all of this. I got home later that night, and after taking a shower and going to bed, I sent out a goodnight text to Carrie. I waited a half hour or so and got no response. Considering we'd been exchanging texts like every couple of minutes for the last day, this was weird. Then I sniffed my hand and noticed that the scent was almost completely gone. Frustrated, I lay down and tried to sleep, but then began to hear the sounds of my mother coughing through the walls. Let's just say, I didn't sleep much that night. The next day I noticed that Carrie still hadn't responded. That was it. I couldn't explain why this was happening, but I definitely had to figure out how to get some more of that oil. So I showed up later at the shop that day and looked for the owner. She was in the back, organizing shelves as I approached her. I asked her if I could possibly purchase some of that oil she'd given me the other day. It works well, doesn't it? She said with a grin. She then went on to tell me that it had been given to her by a deceased husband, who was an archaeologist, and she was unsure of what it was or even where it had come from. So she told me that she could give me a little bit more, but only to be used sparingly. Otherwise, they'll take notice, she said with a sort of nervous grin. Not really understanding what she was talking about, and not really caring, I agreed. She put a single drop on my hand, and I rubbed it in thoroughly. Upon smelling it, I immediately felt a sense of calm come over me. It seemed my mind had already associated good things with the smell. I told her what had happened with my mom, and how the oil was literally changing my life. Then she said she wanted to show me something, and walked to the back of the store. But she left the vial sitting on the table, and the temptation to take it flared up inside me. It was just too easy. I started to hear her walking back from the storage area, and impulsively grabbed the vial off the counter and ran out of the store with it. Totally expecting her to come out after me, I turned back to see the store. However, she never came out. I didn't even have to run, really. I immediately poured a generous amount on my hands and rubbed it in. Not surprisingly, Carrie started returning my texts, and we actually began dating soon after. By the end of the week, it was like I was a completely transformed person. I had the girl of my dreams, and other kids were finally starting to see me differently. However, the night I first tried to kiss Carrie was when things began to take a turn for the worst. I'd walked her home, and while at her front door, I tried to kiss her, and she shied away nervously, leaving me for the night. Down and defeated, I noticed I couldn't smell any scent from the oil. So I went home and immediately rubbed a bunch of it onto my hands. Then Carrie immediately texted me, saying she was sorry and that whenever I was ready to kiss again, she was. This stuff was almost too good. After that, I just laid back in bed with a smile and dozed off for the night. I had a weird nightmare that night, though, where the wrinkled old shopkeeper was giggling and playing in the street like a little girl. Then she looked at me and started laughing hysterically, laughing until she cried even. Then her tears became blood, and I woke up. My eyes still blurry. I blinked a few times and noticed something beside my hand. It was dark, but it looked like a man or something on its hands and knees, sniffing my hand. I screamed and turned the lights on, but there was no one there. Truly horrified, I turned the TV on and put on some cartoons. I figured I must not have been fully awake yet, and somehow I'd imagined it. Later that day, I went to school and everything was pretty much normal. I was still pretty shaken up though. Carrie started texting me again, and I was excited to see her later that day. Once the school bell rang, I bolted out to my bike to ride straight to her house. Then, when I got to her front door, she immediately came out, smiled and kissed me. Then she invited me in, so I went to park my bike, but when I rolled it around the house to put it up against her garage, I got the distinct feeling that someone was watching me. In the corner of my eye, I saw a man across the street, a man with a car accident face, just staring at me. But then, by the time I turned my head towards him, he was gone. I went inside and tried to forget what I'd seen, but obviously I couldn't. So the next day, I went back to the shop, and that was when things really started getting weird. The shop was closed, permanently. I got a cell phone number off Google and called the number for it. And much to my surprise, the shopkeeper actually answered. I began to apologize furiously. I told her that I would give her back the oil. The next sound I heard over the phone sent chills down my spine. She started laughing. "You've seen him, haven't you?" Too scared to respond, I just stood there on the phone. "They've taken an interest in you." "What do you mean?" I asked fearfully. "It seems they can improve your life, because they want a better story, but you must entertain them. At least, that's what my husband thought." Shivering and almost in tears, I asked if I could make it stop. She told me flat out that I needed to try and give the oil to someone else before it ran out. Then she rudely hung up the phone, and I was left staring at the empty shop. I got back home later, pulled the bottle out, and to my horror, it was empty. Clearly stressed beyond belief, I woke up again that night. My room was dark, but in the corner, I saw a figure, his arms at his sides, his head slightly tilted with a bizarre empty grin on his bag-like face, his eyes 2 little black holes. I closed my eyelids tight and pretended he wasn't there, waiting for something to happen. To my surprise, it never did. At least, not yet. I haven't really slept a full night since then. Only now, when I wake up and I know it's still nighttime, I don't open my eyes. And I know I never will again. First the door, then the light. Always shut the outer door before you turn the outside light off. That was the only thing written on the little post-it note left for me by the previous homeowner. I didn't think much of it at the time I discovered it. I was busy moving into my first home, had tons of boxes I still needed to move from the U-Haul into the house, and I couldn't be bothered to keep track of a scribbled-on piece of paper left on the kitchen counter. The last few months before the move had been a bit of a whirlwind for me. At 26, I'd just published my first novel, and it was actually selling pretty well. With money coming into my bank account in large amounts, I decided that it was time to move out of my one-bedroom apartment and find myself an actual house. I also decided it was time to move out of the overcrowded city and give myself some space to breathe. So, I began to search for some property out in the country. It took a little while, but I eventually found the house. Not too big, not too small. It was just off a county road that led deep into farmlands. There were neighbours, but their driveways were about a 5-minute walk from mine. Not too far, but not too close either. The price of the place was very reasonable as well, far lower than what I'd expected. This raised some suspicions in my mind, but after numerous inspections and walkthroughs turned up nothing wrong with not only the house but the property in general, I just thought I'd gotten extremely lucky and bought the place soon after the last walkthrough. Now, the really great thing about the house was that even though it was somewhat removed from civilization, it still had plenty of decent creature comforts. It was a newer house, so electricity and plumbing weren't a problem. There is decent cell service, and the previous owners did some renovations to give the place a more rustic look. There are woods surrounding my house, but the tree line is a fair distance off, so I can observe nature without worrying that a storm will have nature come crashing through my windows. There are wild animals like coyotes and bears nearby, but I picked up a Remington 870 shotgun before I moved, and my wonderful companion Shadow, an almost pure black border collie, has always let me know when there are visitors, both welcome and not, to our abode. Shadow took to our new home like a fish to water. She loved to sniff around at all the new smells of the outdoors, chase squirrels, and explore with me through the many pines, oaks, and ashes that littered the woods behind us. We moved in during May, and the summer was an absolutely fantastic one. Friends came over, barbecues were had, many nights were spent stargazing. But then fall came. The trees changed colours, the warmth drained from the air, and the troubles began to appear. Shadow is very routine-oriented. Always has to have breakfast at a certain time, a walk at a certain time, and has to be let outside to do her business at a certain time. It was one night in early September that I noticed something weird that she was doing. During the summer, when she was let out into the backyard at night, she would wander past where the back porch light would illuminate, nose to the ground. I never had a problem with this because she always came back when I called. And yet, one night, I noticed that when she was let out, she wandered to the edge of the illumination and came to an abrupt stop. I couldn't see too clearly, but I did see her posture shift into one of aggression. And through the chirps of crickets and other noises of night creatures, I heard a low growl from her. This was surprising to me, as Shadow wasn't very aggressive. Sure, she'd bark whenever someone came to the door, but I'd never heard her growl at anything before. So naturally, when I heard her growl at the darkness beyond my backyard light, red flags immediately popped up in my mind. I keep a high-powered flashlight next to my back door, so I grabbed it and shone it out into the blackness of my backyard. Nothing abnormal was highlighted in the massive beam of illumination that came from my flashlight. Just grass, weeds, and the first line of trees that was the gateway into the forest beyond. I swerved the beam of light back and forth a few times, but still saw nothing out of the ordinary. In the minute I spent trying to see what it was that freaked my dog out, she'd done her business and was now coming back inside the house, seemingly relaxed again. I shrugged the whole thing off as a dog being a dog, closed my back door, and continued my night as normal. The next night, however, the strange ritual was performed again. Shadow went outside, went to the edge of the light, stopped suddenly, and began to growl at the night that surrounded her. Once again, warning bells went off in my head, and I grabbed the flashlight again. Scanning the surrounding area had the same results as the previous night. But seeing Shadow relax again within a minute and do her business, well, I thought it was just an animal scent from far away that Shadow could smell, but I couldn't. These nightly incidents did not stop, however, and after a week, I figured it was something Shadow had just started doing. I didn't pay it any mind whatsoever. Well, that came to an end on a night that a new moon was in place. The backyard was darker than usual, and the only light at all came from my back porch light. I let Shadow out, but she only went a few feet out of the door before she stopped in her tracks, ears perked and tail standing straight up. She lowered her head and began to growl lowly, her hackles standing on end. This night, I didn't have to wonder what was going on. My animal instincts were screaming at me that something was out there in the dark, and it was not friendly at all. Worst of all, I had the feeling that whatever creature lurked about in the abyss, it was watching us. Only a few seconds after I'd opened the door, I reached over and grabbed my flashlight, turning it on quickly and wildly swinging the beam of light through the murk. As the light crossed the tree line, I distinctly heard the sound of something scampering back into the woods before my light could reveal what it was. With the absence of whatever that thing was, my lizard brain calmed down, and I even saw Shadow ease up a bit, though she still went to the bathroom near the house and wasted no time coming back inside. I, however, stood still in the doorway, waiting to see if I could hear any sign of our unwelcome visitor coming back. After a few minutes of crickets chirping, night birds calling, and my nerves still being relaxed, I closed the door, shut off the light, and went to bed. Things were calm for the next 2 weeks. Shadow didn't get tense anymore going outside at night, and I was assured our troubles with whatever was out there were over. I even began to hang out in the backyard at night, with the back porch light off, so I could look up at the stars without any light pollution. That came to an abrupt end one cloudy, cold October night. Even though it was cloudy enough to cover both the moon and the stars, I was stubborn and decided to stick it out and wait for the clouds to dissipate. I was sitting in my stargazing chair, one of those chairs you can lie back on and it stretches out so you can actually lie back and stare straight up, and had been listening to a lo-fi channel on YouTube. I didn't have the most comfortable headphones in, so after a while I decided to give my ears a break and took them off. Silence greeted me, utter and complete. None of the nighttime noises I'd gotten used to were in the air, only the sound of me breathing and my own heart beating. In moments, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked into gear. I knew that nature shouldn't be this quiet, and the instinctual terror I'd felt weeks ago came rushing back into me with double the intensity. I scrambled out of my chair, disconnecting my headphones from my phone in my graceless tumble backwards, and was booking it for my back door. As I ran, I didn't hear any footfalls from behind me, yet I did manage to catch the distinct crunch of someone stepping on and crushing my headphones, assuring me that there was indeed something behind me in the dark, and it was coming after me. I got to my back door, thanking God I hadn't locked it, opened it, and stepped inside. I tried to turn on the back porch light, my hands fumbling in fear for a moment before I got it. In that moment, I knew the light had turned on, and before I had a chance to turn around, I heard something from behind me. It was the sharp rustling of grass and of earth being dug up. I turned around, grasping at the flashlight hanging beside me, while trying to spot what had made the noise. Nothing was in the ring of light cast by my back porch light, and when I got the flashlight up and shone it around the yard, it revealed that nothing was there. As I stood in the doorway, scanning the night, Shadow came up beside me. She already had her hackles raised, and began growling into the night right beside me. I knew something was up, and so I decided to call out. "Is anyone there?" I called into the night, not really expecting an answer. "Seriously, if someone's out there, I'm armed and you're freaking me out. I don't want to shoot anyone, but if you keep messing with me, I won't hesitate." Silence was my reply, with the slow ambience of crickets and nighttime animals returning at last. Shadow was much more relaxed as well, so I began to think I just scared myself over nothing. But then my flashlight beam came across something odd on the ground. Right outside of the edge of light created by my porch light, I noticed upturned grass and dirt, a large patch of it. I stared at it in confusion for a moment, wondering what it was, when a memory from childhood popped into my head. I used to play soccer, and sometimes when you were running fast and had to stop quickly, you'd dig your cleats into the grass, tearing up the field and bringing you to a halt. The patch in my backyard looked exactly like that, but I couldn't make myself believe someone had been silently chasing me in cleats. No, whatever had made that had to have been some animal, but animals don't wear shoes with cleats, so the closest thing to cleats some animal might have would be claws. The next day, I called up my local fish and wildlife agency. I described to them the incident and asked them what they thought it could have been. They told me it might have been a bobcat, but I insisted that it couldn't have been. I wouldn't want to tussle with a bobcat, but I highly doubt one could have invoked the primal fear that I'd felt. I asked if there was a potential for the creature being a mountain lion, but I was told we lived too far south for them. With some persistence, I managed to get them to agree that they would send an agent out near my area to investigate. Later that night, when it was time for Shadow to go outside, I grabbed my shotgun and loaded it. Shadow seemed a bit more at ease when she went outside, but I wasn't going to take any chances, and I stood in the doorway with a slug in the chamber, waiting for something to rear its ugly head out of the darkness. Nothing came of it, but throughout the entire time, I felt like I was being observed by something out in the night. Things went on like this for a few days, until one Saturday when I was doing a little gardening next to the side of my house, and I began to dig up the dirt underneath my kitchen window. I stopped when I saw strange impressions in the ground. Looking closer, I saw that they were a faint imprint of track, and following them, I found they circled around my entire home, always stopping at one of the windows, and then picking up again to go to the next window. My blood ran cold at this discovery. Not only were these tracks in no way human, as it didn't look like any shoe print I'd seen before, but whatever was making these seemed to have been profiling my home, and was smart enough to be going to my windows to check for a way in. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, and I did not like that. I decided to wait one night to see if I could catch whatever was doing this. That night, we did the same usual routine, but I acted calmly, like nothing was bothering me. When Shadow came back inside, I shut the door and flipped off the back porch light as usual. But instead of getting ready for bed, I shut off all the house lights, grabbed my shotgun, and waited by the back door. I spent a long time sitting in the dark by the back door, trying to remain calm through my anticipation of whatever was going to come skulking out of the blackness. Hours went by, and I was eventually becoming tired and had difficulty keeping my eyes open. The silence outside and the slow, steady rhythm of my kitchen clock ticking away was almost enough to put me under. Suddenly, a realization hit me, and my eyes shot wide open. It was dead quiet outside. No usual nighttime sounds, just like that night a few weeks back. I placed my ear against the door and tried to listen through it. For the first minute or two, I couldn't hear anything. My ears must have gotten used to the silence, however, as shortly after, I began to faintly pick up the sound of grass being crushed underfoot. It seemed to be coming from the left side of my house and coming closer to the door. It softly stopped, and as I strained to listen, a new sound cut through the darkened home. Light tapping, coming from my kitchen window not 6 feet away from my sitting form. The breath froze in my lungs. Something was at my kitchen window, tapping away quietly. I tried to crane my neck to see if I could see what was causing the sound, but from where I was sitting, I didn't have a good angle. I slowly began to shift my position to get a better look. With my shotgun, which I'd forgotten was leaned up against the doorframe next to me, decided it had had enough standing up and chose right then and there to clatter loudly to the ground next to me. The tapping at the window immediately stopped, and I cursed myself and the firearm internally for being in the situation I was in now. I pressed my ear to the door again, but heard no noises coming from outside. I stayed like this for a good minute or so, trying my hardest to hear any noise that originated past the door. An idea formed in my head. Not a good one, but I didn't know what else to do at the time. Timidly, but loud enough for those close by to hear, I called out, "Hello." I waited with bated breath for a few seconds, but nothing happened. I waited apprehensively for a few more, and still there were no sounds. I let out a sigh, thinking nothing was there and maybe I'd hallucinated the taps on the windows. Suddenly, an explosive burst of sound came from the other side of the door. I distinctively heard the sound of clawed feet running up my back porch steps, and only had a second to prepare when something crashed heavily into my back door. The next couple of moments were pure chaos. Shadow was awoken and started barking from somewhere in the house. I was letting loose a stream of curses and cries of terror, and whatever was on the other side of the door began pounding on it. Through its banging, I distinctly remember hearing whatever was on the other side making a guttural growl that seemed to be a cross between a snake's hiss and a cat's aggressive yowl. In my panic, I grabbed my shotgun and got to my feet, pointing the gun at the door and crying out, "Stop it! Go away! Leave us alone!" Now, my old back door used to have a pane of glass about eye level to me, which is about 6 feet tall. As I stood there, quivering with fear, gun at the ready, a pair of eyes came into view from the other side of the glass. They were larger than any humans, and they were bright yellow, with slit-like pupils you see in a snake's eyes. When they caught sight of me, the banging stopped, and I could hear this thing's labored breathing. It was panting while looking at me, and some old animalistic instinct deep inside me told me those eyes were the eyes of a predator, and it was looking hungrily at its prey. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen with fear. Part of me wanted to shoot at the thing, but I didn't want to damage the only barrier that stood between this creature and me. I then realized Shadow's barking was a lot louder, and looking to my side, I saw she stood next to me, barking, growling, and baring her teeth at the thing behind the door. Looking back up, I saw the yellow eyes shift downward to look at Shadow, and the guttural growl again came through the door. "Oh, no, you don't," I cried, anger suddenly flowing through my veins. "You keep your freaking eyes off of my dog." No way was I going to let this thing that dragged itself from the darkened woods lay one clawed finger on my fur baby. I rushed to the door, turning on the porch light to get a better shot before going for the door lock with my other free hand, steeling myself to blast the bastard and fight to the death to keep my baby girl safe. It turns out I didn't have to. For the moment the porch light turned on, the eyes disappeared from the pane of glass, and I heard the most tormented and fearful howl I've ever heard from man or beast. I could hear the scraping of claws against my wooden deck, as whatever hellspawn that stood at the threshold of my house scrambled to get out of the light and run back to the safety of dark night. As I got the door open, I saw the shape of something large and tall, easily breaching 8 feet on 2 long, gaunt legs, tearing past the perimeter of light created by the back porch light, back into the pitch blackness of the surrounding forest. I didn't sleep that night, instead choosing to drink coffee with my shotgun in my hand until the sun rose. When I went to survey the damage in the morning light, I grimaced at the sight. My deck had massive, deep, gouged scratch marks in the wood. My back door had a large crack in it from where the thing had slammed into it, and a strip of my yard was torn up with the same claw marks that were on my deck. That morning, I called the local hardware store in town, about half an hour away. I explained the situation, leaving out that a monster had attacked, and saying instead that a deer had crashed into my door, and I asked if it was possible if they could get a heavy wooden door to replace mine, and if they could install it the same day. They referred me to a good contractor, who I called, and he said he could get it done today, especially after I told him I'd double his rate if he got it done. As I sat at my kitchen table, still shaken from the previous night's events, wondering what I was going to do tonight, I noticed a corner of a piece of paper sticking out from under the fridge. Curious, and looking for anything to take my mind off what I'd experienced, I rescued the paper from under the fridge and took a look at it. It was the note from the previous homeowner, the one I'd completely forgotten about. Its message about always shutting the outside door before turning the light off suddenly made much more sense to me. So did why the house was priced for so cheap. I cursed the previous owner for leaving me in the dark about this nighttime visitor. When the contractor arrived, he let out a long whistle as he surveyed the damage. "You said a deer crashed into your door. Must have been a hell of a thing chasing it to make those claw marks on your deck. You're lucky the door didn't break down. You'd have had a hell of a mess to clean up." I nodded glumly, feigning ignorance about the claw marks in my deck. As he was installing my new door, he noticed my porch light. "You know, I could run back to Earl's Hardware after I'm finished with this door, pick up a motion-activated floodlight and install it for you. I'm sure it'd help keep those nighttime critters away." Thank God for that man, because my brain at that time was so in shock, I hadn't even considered something like that. It seemed my nightly guest didn't like light, so a motion-activated light would keep it at bay forever. I thanked him profusely, taking him up on his offer. After that day, things went back to normal for a long time. Months went by, and even though I would tense up every time at night when I saw the motion light go off, I didn't find any tracks near my house, and I never heard a trace of the creature anywhere near my property. I even asked my neighbors how things were going for them, and if they'd had any nightly disturbances. Their answer was always no, so I figured my problems were all over and done with. That is, I thought my problems were over until the later winter months, when I began to notice the motion light staying on for longer and longer durations. Shadow began to get scared even stepping a foot outside when the sun went down, and I began to see the familiar odd tracks in the winter snow. Every couple of days, I'd see them move closer and closer towards the house. I swear I even heard that low, hissing growl one night. It floated up on the wind when I lingered by the open back door, wanting to see the stars. That door was shut and locked the moment the sound hit my ears. I was feeling like a prisoner in my own home again, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find where the previous homeowner had gone, and none of the neighbors had anything like this happening to them. I thought the motion light was a surefire solution, but that was falling apart and I didn't know why. But then I found the note again, hidden under a pile of junk mail on my kitchen table. It still read the same ominous message it had when I first moved in. But desperation made me do something I hadn't done before. I flipped it over, and to my surprise, there was another message written on the back. Shooting it just makes it pissed. Only bright light will drive it away. Don't use the outside lights too much, though. It'll get used to them. Now I think I may be in some serious trouble. Well, first of all, thanks to all of you who entered my little contest to decide on the title of tonight's stories. The video, that is. Yeah, that really is the most difficult part, especially when you put together an anthology like this one. You've got a collection of stories, and what the hell do you call them? Obviously, I want something that's going to attract as many people as possible to come and watch the video, but it also has to remain faithful to the theme, so thanks to all of you who entered, and of course, to the winner. Now, I've recorded this before I even work out who the winner is, so well done to you. I don't know who you are yet, but well done anyway. So, that's your Friday evening entertainment. What will I be coming back to you with next? Who knows? Well, you're enjoying this Sunday series I've got going at the moment, so that'll probably be there on Sunday. And next week, I have some mammoth stories lined up for you. 3 big uns. I say that now, it's easier to say it before you record them, I tell you, but getting down to recording them is a different matter altogether. But yeah, some big ones lined up for next week. Well, go and enjoy your weekend as best you can. Times are still tough, but, well, I'm here for you, providing a little bit of entertainment. You go out there and have as much fun as you can. I'll see you again real soon. Till the next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.